Here's the translation into natural, fluent American English, preserving the haunting, psychological, and visceral horror of the original, while ensuring it flows seamlessly for an American audience. The tone remains immersive, with vivid imagery and a chilling blend of supernatural dread, body horror, and emotional weight, tailored to evoke the terror of Clara's inescapable gift. A blank sheet of paper floats in a dark room. A red stain begins to spread from the corner, forming patterns that seem random at first but slowly reveal a face. Your face. Ever wondered what happens when a child sees the future? Not through dreams or ordinary premonitions, but through the most primal blood of humanity. This is the story of a girl in a small American town who discovered a terrible gift, predicting the future with drawings made from menstrual blood. The horror isn't just in what she draws, but in what her drawings do to us. Because once your face appears on her paper, the clock starts ticking, and it never stops. The small town of Hemlock Springs, tucked deep in Oregon's dense forests, was known for its thick woods and a lake that changed colors with the seasons. A place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were impossible to keep, or so people thought. Clara Morrison was 12 when her first period came. Her mother, Elaine, had died 2 years earlier, under circumstances the townsfolk still whispered about in corners. Suicide, some said, murder, others suspected. Her father, Thomas, worked double shifts at the local sawmill to provide for his daughter and keep his own demons at bay. At school, Clara was the quiet girl in the back row, the one who doodled in the margins of her notebooks while others socialized. The one who ate alone. Not by choice, but because there was something in her eyes, something ancient and hungry that made other kids instinctively shy away. It began on an October afternoon. The sky was heavy with bruise-colored clouds, and Clara felt a sharp cramp tear through her abdomen as she walked home from school. The pain doubled her over on the sidewalk, biting her lip to keep from screaming. When she got home, she saw the blood staining her underwear and trickling down her legs. There was no one to explain what was happening, no one to comfort her. In the solitude of the bathroom, hands trembling, Clara wiped the blood with toilet paper. And then, driven by an impulse she couldn't explain, she ran her finger through the red stain and began to draw on the bathroom's white wall. Thin, precise lines formed the outline of a body. A woman suspended by invisible ropes. The drawing was simple, almost childlike, but disturbingly specific. A shiver ran down Clara's spine, but she couldn't stop. Her fingers moved as if they had a will of their own, adding grim details. Wide, staring eyes, a mouth gaped in a silent scream, a necklace of beads that looked like vertebrae. When she finished, an eerie calm washed over her. She washed her hands and went to bed, falling asleep instantly. The next morning, the substitute teacher, Mrs. Winters, didn't show up for class. The students waited 20 minutes until the principal entered, his face pale as paper. Mrs. Winters was found dead. In her home this morning, he announced, voice shaking. It appears to have been an accident. A knot twisted in Clara's stomach. Later, she overheard adults whispering Mrs. Winters had been found hanging by her neck, wearing a necklace of stones that looked like bones. That night, Clara scrubbed the drawing on the bathroom wall furiously, but the blood had dried and seeped into the plaster, like a mark that refused to fade. 3 days later, her second period came. Inexplicable for a girl so young. This time, Clara was prepared. She'd stolen some pads from the local pharmacy and hidden a notebook under her mattress. When she felt the blood flow, she grabbed the notebook and with trembling fingers began to draw. The second drawing showed a heavy-set man in a suit, with thinning hair tied in a ponytail. His face was frozen in absolute terror as a spiral formed on his chest, like a giant screw boring through his flesh. 2 days later, Mr. Patterson, an insurance rep visiting town, was found dead in his hotel room. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but the paramedics who arrived first reported something disturbing, a spiral-shaped mark on the man's chest, as if something had tried to drill its way out of his body. Clara began to understand her terrible gift. Her menstrual blood, coming irregularly, painfully in cycles that defied normal patterns, let her see the future, but not just any future, only death, only suffering. She tried to resist the urge to draw when her third period came. She sat in the bathroom, shaking as the blood flowed. Her hands itched, begging for the touch of paper, for the release of the visions pressing against the inside of her skull. It was her father who found her passed out in the bathroom, a trickle of blood running between her legs, her eyes rolled back. When he took her to the hospital, the doctors found nothing wrong. Just the stress of early puberty, they said. Some girls have irregular cycles. But Clara knew the truth. It wasn't the bleeding that made her sick. It was resisting the vision. The next night, locked in her room, Clara gave in. With trembling hands, she collected the menstrual blood in a small container and, using a fine paintbrush from her art class, began to draw in the hidden notebook. The third drawing made her choke with terror. It was her father, Thomas Morrison, with empty eyes and skin covered in coin-sized holes from which black threads emerged, looking disturbingly like hair. Clara tore the page out immediately, burning it in the bathroom sink. It was the first time she'd drawn someone close, someone she loved. The thought that her drawing could cause her father's death filled her with indescribable dread. In the days that followed, Clara watched her father obsessively, searching for any sign that the fate she'd drawn was manifesting. Thomas noticed his daughter's strange behavior, but chalked it up to puberty and grief over her mother. A week passed. Clara began to relax. Maybe she'd broken the cycle. Maybe destroying the drawing had saved her father. But then, on Sunday morning, Thomas woke up scratching his arm furiously. Clara watched in horror as he rolled up his sleeve, revealing small bumps on his skin, like insect bites. At the center of each was a tiny, glistening black dot. "Guess we've got a flea problem," Thomas said with a forced smile. "I'll grab some spray later." Clara felt her world collapse. No matter what she did, the drawings came to life. Even if she destroyed the paper, the vision was already rooted in reality. And now her father was doomed to a horrible fate she couldn't even imagine. That night, Clara dreamed of her mother. Elaine appeared not as the worn-out figure ravaged by painkiller addiction in her final days, but as the vibrant woman from Clara's earliest memories. In the dream, they stood by the lake, its water red as blood. "You inherited my burden," Elaine said, holding her daughter's hands. "You have to learn to control it before it consumes you." "What burden?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "The drawings," Elaine whispered. "The damned blood drawings. That's why I died, Clara. Because I drew my own death so many times, until it finally came for me." Clara woke with a stifled scream. For the first time, she understood the true horror of her condition. It wasn't just seeing the future. It was actively shaping it. Each drawing wasn't just a prediction, it was a sentence. And her father would be next, unless she could find a way to break the cycle of blood and ink she'd inherited. Here's the translation into natural, fluent American English, preserving the visceral, psychological, and cosmic horror of the original, while ensuring it flows seamlessly for an American audience. The tone remains immersive, with vivid imagery and a chilling escalation of dread, blending body horror, supernatural terror, and Clara's tragic realization of her role in an ancient cycle. 4 days after the first bumps appeared, Thomas Morrison began to suffer excruciating pain throughout his body. The small marks had spread, covering his chest, neck, and face. Each bump had grown to the size of a pea, the skin stretched and glossy, as if something were pressing from within. Clara watched helplessly as her father transformed. He refused to go to the hospital, insisting it was just an allergic reaction. "It'll pass," he repeated like a mantra, swallowing painkillers in alarming quantities. Clara recognized the pattern. Her mother had done the same before she died. At school, Clara withdrew further. She spent breaks in the library, obsessively researching menstruation, blood, and ancient rituals. She found references to cultures that considered menstrual blood sacred, imbued with powers of both creation and destruction. In obscure texts on witchcraft, she read about women who used blood for premonitory visions. But nothing explained why her drawings became reality. Why people died exactly as she depicted. Her fourth period hit like a tsunami of pain. Clara collapsed in the school bathroom, waking in the nurse's office to Mrs. Rodriguez's genuinely concerned gaze. "This isn't normal for a girl your age," Mrs. Rodriguez said, offering her a glass of water. "Have you talked to your dad about this?" Clara shook her head. Her father could barely take care of himself now. Each day the bumps grew more pronounced, and Thomas spent hours locked in the bathroom. Clara could hear him sobbing, sometimes screaming in pain. On the night of her fourth period, Clara gathered her courage. She took her notebook, a vial to collect the blood, and locked herself in her room. This time, she wouldn't draw death or suffering. She'd try something different. With precise strokes, she drew her father, not as he was now, covered in bumps, but healthy as he used to be. In the drawing, Thomas smiled, his eyes clear and alive, his skin smooth and flawless. Clara stared at the drawing for hours, praying it would work, that she could undo what she'd done. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of her mother again. "That's not how it works," Elaine said, her eyes sad. "You can't undo what's already begun." "Then how do I save him?" Clara asked desperately. Elaine looked past her, into the depths of the red lake. "You have to complete the cycle. Blood demands blood." Clara jolted awake to sounds of agony from her father's room. She ran to his door and found it locked. "Dad!" she screamed, pounding on the wood. "Let me in!" No response, just muffled groans and an odd sound like fabric slowly tearing. Clara raced to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and returned to pry the lock. When the door finally gave way, what she saw made her reel in absolute terror. Thomas was on his knees in the center of the room, his skin entirely covered in bumps that had grown to the size of eggs. From each one sprouted a glossy black thread. They weren't hairs, as Clara had first thought. They were more like tentacles or roots, thin as silk, but strong enough to move with purpose. Thomas lifted his face to his daughter, his eyes nearly obscured by the strange growths. "Clara," he whispered, his voice warped into something unrecognizable. "Help me." Clara froze, watching as the black threads extended, some already several inches long, slithering through the air as if trying to reach her. "What's happening to you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Thomas tried to answer, but a convulsion shook him. His body contorted, and more black threads burst through his skin, tearing it in places. Blood mixed with a viscous, clear fluid dripped from the wounds. "I'm changing," he managed between spasms of pain. "I can feel something inside me, trying to get out." Clara knew it was her fault. The drawing she'd made, even though destroyed, had planted a terrible seed in reality. And now her father was becoming something she couldn't comprehend. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat in the hallway, watching through the cracked door as her father underwent the most horrific metamorphosis imaginable. The black threads kept growing, some reaching the ceiling, where they anchored, forming a web-like structure. Thomas's skin was now just a torn, bloody casing, through which a new form was emerging. The next morning, Mrs. Rodriguez, worried about Clara's absence from school, went to the Morrison house. When no one answered the door, she used the spare key social services had provided for periodic checks on Thomas and Clara. What she found made her scream echo through the neighborhood. Thomas Morrison, or what was left of him, hung suspended in the center of the room, held by hundreds of black threads that now formed an intricate web covering the walls, ceiling, and floor. His body had become something unrecognizable, a pulsing black cocoon, with fragments of what was once human still visible. An eye here, a few fingers there, a piece of jaw that still moved as if trying to speak. Clara sat in the hallway watching, her father's transformation passively. When she saw Mrs. Rodriguez, her eyes lit up with a terrible knowledge. "He's almost ready," she said calmly. "My dad's becoming something new." Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed Clara's arm and dragged her out of the house, calling the police and an ambulance. Authorities arrived quickly, but no one was prepared for what they found inside the Morrison residence. Hazmat. Specialists were called in, assuming some kind of fungus or parasite had infected Thomas. The house was sealed off, and Clara was taken for observation to the psychiatric hospital in the neighboring town. It was there, in the sterile solitude of a hospital room, that Clara felt her fifth period begin. This time, she had nothing to draw with. They'd taken all her belongings, leaving her only in a hospital gown. Desperate, Clara used her own blood to draw on the white wall of her room. With her fingers, she traced Mrs. Rodriguez's form, not as she was now, but as she would soon be, covered in the same bumps, the same black threads sprouting from her skin. Clara understood the full truth then. Her menstrual blood didn't just reveal the future. It created it. And what had started with her father wouldn't end with him. It was contagious. It would spread like a plague. Sitting on the floor of her hospital room, staring at the bloody drawing on the wall, Clara began to laugh. A hysterical laugh that soon turned to sobs. "Mom," she whispered to the empty room. "What did you start?" Deep in her mind, Clara felt something respond. Not her mother, but something far older, far hungrier. Something that had waited millennia for a girl with the gift of creative blood to fully manifest in this world, and Clara had just opened the door. 2 weeks had passed since Clara Morrison was admitted to St. Joseph's Psychiatric Hospital. 3 weeks of medication, observation, and scrutiny by specialists desperate to understand the girl found catatonic in the house, now known as the epicenter of the Hemlock incident. The Morrison residence was sealed off, surrounded by white CDC tents. Inside, what was once Thomas Morrison continued to grow, its black webbing spreading to every corner of the house. Scientists in hazmat suits tried to collect samples, but the threads reacted, hardening and probing at their suits. 5 people were already infected. 2 cops who first entered the house, a CDC scientist whose suit failed, and 2 neighbors living near the Morrisons. All showed the same symptoms: small skin bumps that rapidly grew, sprouting black threads that moved on their own. Hemlock Springs was under quarantine. News helicopters buzzed overhead, beaming images of the small town ringed by military barriers. Social media churned with theories: a botched government experiment, an alien fungus, a Russian bioweapon. No one guessed the truth. No one except Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's chief psychiatrist treating Clara. From day one, she'd noticed something odd about the bloodstains in Clara's room. "They're not random," she told her colleague, Dr. Reeves, as they studied photos of the house's walls. "They're drawings, crude, but deliberate." Dr. Reeves adjusted his glasses, skeptical. "You're saying she drew with her own blood? Why?" Dr. Chen hesitated. As a doctor, she was bound to science. But as a woman raised on her Chinese grandmother's tales of women's blood holding power, she sensed something deeper. "We need a test," she said. "I want to see what happens if she gets paper and ink." The test was approved under tight security. Clara, who'd barely spoken since her admission, was brought to a secure room. Cameras watched as Dr. Chen placed paper and red ink on the wall table before her. "Clara," Dr. Chen said softly, "would you like to draw?" The girl's vacant eyes sparked to life. Her hands shook as they reached for the paper. "I can't," she whispered. "You don't understand. If I draw, it'll happen." "What'll happen, Clara?" Dr. Chen asked, sitting across from her. "What I draw becomes real." Clara's eyes brimmed with raw terror. "I drew my dad like that. I turned him into that." Her confession was recorded, transcribed, analyzed. Most experts dismissed it as trauma-induced delusion. Dr. Chen wasn't convinced. That night, alone in her office, she pored over Clara's drawings from the house and hospital, walls comparing them to photos of the infected victims. The patterns were eerily identical. The same strange structures erupting from their skin. Even more chilling was what she found in Elaine Morrison's medical records. Clara's late mother had been hospitalized multiple times for psychotic episodes, claiming she could see the future through her menstrual blood. Her journal, seized after her suicide, contained drawings made in a reddish-brown substance investigators assumed was ink. Drawings that depicted people dying exactly as they were found weeks or months later. A shiver ran through Dr. Chen. What if Clara was telling the truth? What if the menstrual blood of these women held properties beyond modern science's grasp? In the isolation ward, Clara felt her 6th period begin. There was no hiding it. Sensors monitoring her vitals alerted the medical team, who rushed to her room. "I'm menstruating," Clara said, her voice flat. "You need to sedate me now." The nurse looked puzzled. "Honey, there's no need." "You don't understand," Clara screamed, suddenly frantic. "If I'm not sedated, I'll draw. And if I draw, you'll all die." The outburst drew Dr. Chen, who raced to the room. Seeing Clara's state, she ordered a sedative. As the nurse prepared the injection, Clara thrashed on the bed, hands clawing, eyes rolling back. "It's coming," she moaned. "He's coming through me." "Who's coming, Clara?" Dr. Chen asked, gripping her hands. Clara turned slowly, her gaze piercing with terrifying clarity. "You know who. You've seen the drawings. You know what they mean." Before Dr. Chen could respond, the nurse administered the sedative. Clara's eyes fluttered shut. "My mum wasn't strong enough," she murmured as the drug took hold. "She killed herself to stop the cycle, but I won't. I'll finish what we started." As Clara slipped into unconsciousness, Dr. Chen felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen, a familiar ache that shouldn't be there. Her period wasn't due for another 2 weeks. Across the hospital, other female patients reported similar symptoms: off-cycle periods, intense pain, heavy bleeding. In their dreams, they saw the same vision: a red lake under a black sky, where something vast and ancient stirred in the depths. At the Morrison house, the webbing grew, black threads snaking through vents, burrowing into the soil, reaching neighboring homes. Anyone who touched them became infected. And the infected eventually became what Thomas Morrison had. Not dead, but transformed, part of something greater, just beginning to awaken. At the web's heart, where Thomas's body once lay, something new took shape. It pulsed with a life that wasn't human, had never been human, but had used Clara's blood and her father's body as a gateway to this world. On the 7th day of the quarantine, at dawn, every light in Hemlock Springs went out. Communications died. Helicopters overhead reported an impossible sight before losing contact, black threads rising from every house, every building, weaving a massive web that shrouded the town like a grotesque dome. 3 days later, when military forces breached the thread barrier, they found no one. No living, no dead. only silence and blood-drawn patterns on every wall, in every home, on every surface. Drawings of a future no one was ready to face. Somewhere far away, Clara Morrison smiled. She'd escaped in the chaos, carrying her mother's legacy and the gift of blood that shaped the future. The future she'd draw now wasn't for a small Oregon town. It was for the world. The cycle of blood never ends. It finds new vessels to flow through, new paths to forge, new bodies to transform. Clara knows her actions carry terrible consequences. She knows she's helping something ancient and ravenous enter our world. But she also knows there's no turning back. The cycle began long ago, passed from mother to daughter through generations. She's merely the current vessel, the brush through which the entity manifests. As she watches the drawing dry, Clara whispers to no one in particular. If you ever see my drawings, it's already too late. Because it means I've already drawn you, and what I draw always becomes real. On the hotel table, the drawing begins to pulse faintly, as if alive, as if breathing, and somewhere in Chicago, a girl feels her first period begin, along with an inexplicable urge to draw with her own blood. The cycle continues. If you enjoyed this content and crave more psychological horror stories that delve into the intimate terrors of body and mind, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone else who savors true existential dread. After all, as Clara said, when you see these drawings, it's already too late to escape. You've already been drawn, and what's drawn always becomes real.